Okay, to finish these spindles off, I just need to make the two mounts that are going to hold the caliper on. So using a piece of stock, I machined up two bushes and tapped them M10. These are going to be positioned over there like that, and then they're going to be welded on. Something like that. So the disc is being used to position the caliper. It's really tight on there, and then all that I needed to do was make sure that the caliper was not touching the disc on either side. And now I'm just going to weld up some fillet welds so that the caliper's on. And then the last thing to do is the two tapered bushes, and then these spindles are done. Got a little bit on the hot side, and there's a ton of oil inside there. That looks pretty good. So to finish these lower control arms, I made one a little bit shorter. This is the first one that I did, but the control arm itself was too long, so that when it was, this rose joint was screwed in all the way, it was at its shortest distance and the wheel was just a little bit under the arch, so there wasn't any room for making it shorter. So then this lower control arm I made a little bit shorter, so now I can adjust in or out of the wheel. This I'm going to change now. I'm just going to cut a little bit shorter and just move in this ball joint a little bit in. So I finished welding these up, applied a little bit of red oxide and some black paint just to stop them from rusting. But before I install these, I'd like to move the engine over that way, and that's because the wheel touches this part of the gearbox, and I can afford to move the engine over just a little bit because there's quite a bit of space here. I'll show you like that. I can move it up probably, I don't know, 8 to 10 millimeters at least. I've assembled the hub with the disc and the caliper. The lower control arm's also in. I'm working on the steering rack now to get it to fit, but these arms are too long because I've brought the whole hub in by about 25 millimeters. So what I'm going to have to do is shorten this this arm by about 25 mils. So instead of cutting and joining it and welding it again, what I've realized is that there should be enough thread on here if this screws a little bit further in to the tie rod end. So here's another steering rack over here, and here you can see, well, if you look at this side, here you can see this is in the standard position as it comes out of the car. There's still quite a lot of thread here. So this side I've cut off 25 millimeters, and this should allow me to screw this tie rod on all the way up to there with the locking nut still on. So this steering rack is much newer, so I just need to cut all of this off because this is all in the way, and then I'm going to trim these ends and then see how it fits, if I can get the wheels within range to be able to get the toe in right. This is the original steering rack which I've just pulled out, and if you look here, if I try and line them up, oh, come on, something like that, and get these more or less there, I can immediately see that this is sticking out quite a bit more, about 15 millimeters or so, maybe 20 millimeters. So that's a bonus because this is a little bit of a narrow track. So all I've got to check now is if the actual arm is the same length between the two. And then what I'll do is I'll use the shorter of the arms. So I'm just going to take these tie rod ends off and then measure the arms. Here you can see the difference in the length of the steering racks now. So I've cut about 25 millimeters off either side of this rack. You can see they're both touching the wall there. But that should give me the right amount. I might need to take a little bit more off just to have a bit of tolerance. But let's get this rack mounted, put it all together and see how it works. I am so beyond stoked with this machine. Not only did it cut one block of 30mm aluminium, it cut two. Woohoo! The last thing to do to finish these bell cranks off is to machine this slot here in. So the idea was to take this part, put it in the machine like that, and then just simply machine off the top there and put that slot in. But the more I look at this, the less I like it, because there's no reason for this part here to be open. So what I can do, instead of making the slot go all the way through, is I can machine just a pocket, because this rod eye goes in like that, something like that. So there's no need for all of this to be open at the top here. So I think if I put this in the machine like that, and I machine a pocket in here for that to fit into. Okay, so the rear bell cranks are done. You can see I've got that one in there. There's the other one over there. So I've put the engine back in. I've shifted the steering rack forwards, to the right and up by 10 millimeters. And I've shifted the engine over in that direction 10 millimeters. So that looks really good now. I've got way better clearance here because the wheel was very, very close here. So shifting the whole engine and box over 10 millimeters that way has resolved that. So I think the next thing that I want to do is get one of these suckers fitted. Obviously it's too long, so I'm going to need to cut a section out of here. Probably going to have to cut that whole section out. So I'm just going to measure from the back base flange to the face of the CV joint and see what that measurement is, and then we'll strip these down. We'll stick that shaft in the lathe and see how straight it is, and then just make sure that once I've welded it up, it stays to the same tolerance or better. So let's strip these down and get the shafts out. Okay. So I've just chopped this section here out of the drive shaft. Now these two here are going to be welded back together. Something like that. Obviously we need to get it straight. Fun and games. So I've fitted the drive shaft here. You can see that gap there. It hasn't been welded yet. But that is obviously too tight because this side of the drive shaft has bottomed out, and I need at least a 8mm, 10mm gap on the inside of that CV joint. So what I'm going to do now is drop the car on its wheels and load up that wheel, and then measure that gap and just see how much it's gone in by. Oh, come on. It's like maybe changed by a millimeter or two. Okay, so I've got to cut these a bit shorter so I can have a bit of play in there. I don't know if it's possible to see, but you can see on that shaft, it's right at the bottom, so it can come out quite a bit. And of course we're going to have syncing with the light issues. There we go. So this is the left hand side of the car, and you can see, oops, you can see the gap there. Can you see that? I don't know if you can see the gap. You can see the gap. So there's about a 7-8mm gap. It probably could be a little bit bigger, but this is with the suspension loaded, and if it loads up any more, the gap's just going to get bigger. I'm going to give it a go at this, so I'm just going to make the other side a little bit bigger to give it a bit more clearance, and then drive shafts are done. So this is the right hand drive shaft. You can see there's the cut there. I need to make it a little bit shorter still, so I'm just going to cut a piece off there. I'm going to chamfer these two edges and then weld it up. So that's welded up now. So what I'm going to do now is just clean that up, machine it off. I'm going to put a sleeve over there and then weld either side of the sleeve, just because that's cast steel, and just to make sure the weld is going to be able to handle 250 horsepower. So the drive shafts are done, and now I can move on to the rear suspension. But I think the easiest way to do that is to put the car back on the rotisserie and turn it upside down. So that means wheels off, suspension out, engine out, steering rack out. Well, I suppose I can leave the steering rack in. Everything that's in the car needs to come out. All the wiring, all of that junk that's in there. Back on the rotisserie, and we'll turn it over. So I think that'll be for the next episode.